Welcome to the special July 4th edition of Legal AF. We've got a lot to discuss today. We'll talk about Donald Trump's purported financial disclosures showing that in 2025 he made over $2 billion in over 21,000 individual stock trades, massive crypto schemes, licensing deals, quid pro quos with foreign countries. And I say purported financial disclosures because I believe it is just the tip of the iceberg. I think the $2 billion being disclosed is a fraction of the money that Donald Trump and his crime family have made thus far. I want to talk about Midas Touch host Katie Phang's efforts to release the Epstein files, and specifically the response by the Trump regime with minutes to go before a court-ordered deadline. The Trump regime scrambled and asked for an additional 60 days to appeal a court order requiring them to turn over a privilege or redaction log, and certain Epstein files will go through what the DOJ, Todd Blanche, and the racketeering enterprise the DOJ has filed in federal court. Special counsel Jacky Smith breaks his silence this week. I think he gave a powerful interview with Nicole Wallace on MS Now. We'll talk about what Jacky Smith said and the implications of Jacky Smith speaking out right now. We'll also talk about Donald Trump's top prosecutor in Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, pursuing a frivolous and bogus felony criminal prosecution against a two-time Olympic canoeist for touching the reflecting pool, which the Trump regime says is one of the reasons that there was all of this algae and why the reflecting pool was such an utter disaster after Donald Trump made it so much worse. We're going to cover all of that. I want to begin, though, by just talking about what former President Biden posted on July 4th. Because we don't have a real president right now, or someone who views the role as just enriching himself and his family, criming every single day, covering up child sex trafficking rings, and behaving like a demonic 3-year-old. No offense to demonic 3-year-olds who behave far more mature than Donald Trump does. But as Donald Trump is posting Democrats this, and at 2:11 a.m. in the morning, posting photos of Pee Wee Herman next to Senator John Ossoff, or just absurd things like that. Today should have been a unifying day for our country. It should have been a moment that brought us all together. It should have been a nonpartisan day. You know, you obviously know now the disaster that was the so-called Great American State Fair, which wasn't great. It wasn't even a fair. You've seen the hate and venom that Donald Trump is injecting into our country and the world, frankly, every day as he's crashed our economy, as most Americans feel that they're living through a great recession or a depression, as Donald Trump breached every one of the promises that he made. Things are far less affordable, not more affordable. Inflation is surging. There are wars all over the world caused specifically by Donald Trump's reckless and malicious and despicable genocidal behavior. Well, all of that is going on. Donald Trump's now saying, now we have to hunt the communists. I mean, it's like literally almost verbatim some of the words that Hitler used in the 1930s, that we gotta hunt the communists. If you either stand with Karl Marx or you stand with MAGA. And then you have state regime media, Fox, pushing that out every single day. And it's a hunt for the communists now, from now until the midterms. And that's Donald Trump's July 4th message: hunt the communists. If Democrats are offering a message of actually delivering on affordability, that's communist, hunt them down. If New York City Mayor Mamdani talks about, hey, we need to look out for each other, especially in these heat waves, focus on conserving power, consider setting your thermostat to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, Fox and the $1 trillion MAGA oligarchical machine goes, oh my God, that's communism. That's commie. You know, if you talk about a rent stabilization board, freezing the raising of rents for a 2-year period, Trump and Fox, well, how dare they do that? Meanwhile, these right-wing billionaires have literally stolen and destroyed this country. They've pilfered. They've gotten all of the benefits, tax cuts, this, write-offs here, write-offs there. And then they go, but the boogeyman are the communists that we need to go after. And Trump goes, the communists are these immigrants, all these other people, those are the communists that we need to be going after. And it's just notable as well that as you have, what was it? The Trump regime was attacking Mamdani, and then literally 24 hours after, you have the Energy Secretary Chris Wright say, as we approach peak electricity demand in the 13-state Mid-Atlantic region at 7 a.m. this morning, less than 6% of electricity generation was coming from renewables. Over 91% of generation is coming from gas, nuclear, and coal. Keep our air conditioning blasting, America. Keep our air conditioning blasting, America. They show PJM generation fuel mix, and they're bragging that the fuel mix doesn't have renewables. Like, how stupid can you be? While China's out there leading a renewable revolution and making so much money while doing it, and while America could be building so many jobs. You know how we had that horrible jobs report this past week, only 57,000 jobs that were reported, but we've seen all these downward revisions every month of like 40 to 50,000. So we probably created no jobs last month, which, by the way, Wall Street loves that. No jobs, less jobs, jobs losses. The Fed may have to decrease interest rates. Yeah, let's celebrate job losses. That's how skewed our entire system has become here. But while the Trump regime is bragging about killing American potential jobs and killing renewable energy projects, one of the things that we know going into this heat wave, where people were literally falling and collapsing and going on life support in DC because of the heat wave there, as the Trump regime and Fox says, get everybody out there. We need more people out there. PJM interconnection, who I just mentioned, that was cited by the Trump regime as being great because they don't use renewables. The largest U.S. power grid has announced it is no longer able to provide expected energy requirements amid a record-breaking heat wave, serving 67 million American people in the Mid-Atlantic, South and Washington, D.C. This grid operator is now implementing emergency plans for utilities to reduce demand as it struggles to stabilize the system and avoid potential power outages. Doesn't everything seem to be an emergency right now? Emergency fertilizer declarations out of Morocco that was declared this week because the Trump regime tariffed Canada. Hey, they have fertilizers over there. So you make it impossible to import fertilizers from our allies. So you then have to declare emergency declarations to bring in Morocco fertilizer, which is not going to be effective, while you have resulted in the a massive, shutdown in the Strait of Hormuz. And now the Trump regime is bragging and saying, look at it, we're doing 10 million barrels a day. We're doing 10 million barrels. You're doing 20. First off, you're not. You're doing a quarter right now at max. A quarter of the crude is exiting the Strait of Hormuz than did before the war started. A quarter. It's like when the Trump regime brags, China's buying 12 million metric tons of soybeans. I didn't have to think about soybeans under former President Biden. China happened to be buying 26 million metric tons. 12 million is less than 26 million. And actually, the real number is closer to 6 million metric tons, which is why the Trump regime has to repeatedly declare emergency bailouts for the farmers. Emergency fertilizer caused again by the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, because a lot of fertilizer and the byproducts involved in fertilizers are in the Middle East. Emergency fertilizers, emergency power outages, emergency this, emergency that, because the Trump regime, they don't follow facts, they don't follow evidence. And there is a legal corollary parallel to all of this, because the reason they despise our court system so much, the reason that they hate it all much, is that it is a place where evidence is presented, evidence is tested, evidence is challenged. Evidence is not allowed if it is not reliable, if it doesn't have a probative value. If its probative value is outweighed significantly by its prejudicial value, you then have the evidence not being permitted to come in. There's a reason why Trump loses all of his cases in court, or loses most of his cases in court, because it requires the scrutiny of evidence and facts. And on July 4th, Evidence and facts should be nonpartisan, but Trump would love to go into a court and rail. It's the communists did it. They're a communist. They're a communist. In a court, you can't do that. In the country with a propaganda fueled culture led by the oligarchs who want to get richer and richer and richer. And by the way, they are getting way richer at your expense on July 4th. You have all of the lies, all the disinfo peddled all of the time. I mean, as we talk about Trump's financials, I mean, the Reuters did a deep dive of these Trump supporters who lost their life savings. They put their $40,000 that they tucked away for their life savings into the Trump meme coins because they thought Trump was going to make them rich. Then when they lost all of their money, when they lost all of the crypto in their wallet, when they lost all the money, they then blame Democrats for shorting the crypto. They go, it's the Democrats whom I can't imagine my Donald Trump would do this. Really? You can't imagine that the guy who's defrauded everybody his entire life, dating back to the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, this, you don't think that there's a pattern here, that he bankrupts everything? You don't think that everything in his life looks like Trump makes $2.2 billion on crypto? The people who held the meme coin, they lost $4 billion. 1 million crypto wallets with over $4 billion worth of Trump's meme coins and Trump's. They lost money while Trump made $2.2 billion on the commissions and the other sales of it. By the way, you look at World Liberty Financial, the thing that Trump does with Witkoff and Trump's kids and Witkoff's kids, while Witkoff is out there acting like he's an envoy to the United States, even though he was never appointed. World Liberty Financial, which took in hundreds of millions of dollars from Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates and all of that. Yeah, Trump and Witkoff and all of them, they made a killing. They crushed it. They made so much money while while investors lost 80% of their money. The people at the top made all the money. If you look at these charts of Donald Trump's profits versus his investors and shareholders, I mean, Trump's inner circle, they make a lot of money. Let's be very clear. We're not talking about him. But the retail people, all the other people, the Trump supporters, everybody else who's been involved in these things, they've lost massive amounts of money. And sometimes you hear economists refer to things as like the K-shaped economy, right? And that's a euphemism for you're getting screwed. They call it K-shaped to make it sound all scientific. But that means the group of right-wing oligarchs, they're getting rich. The richest 1%, they've gotten so much more wealthy. Everybody else is on the bottom of that if you draw a K and you draw a horizontal line through it, everybody else all going straight down. That's why the consumer sentiment right now is the worst since the University of Michigan consumer sentiment, because most Americans are living right now in a Great Depression, or at least a Great Recession, psychologically tortured, living paycheck to paycheck if they're lucky enough to get a paycheck in the first place, having their health care ripped away, and now being told the boogeyman is the communists to go after. And that's who we need to go after. That's as Mamdani said in his July 4th speech, it's the oldest trick in the book. It's the oldest trick in the book to divide people in politics, to say, oh, well, now we're going after the communists. And they're doing that because they didn't deliver on any one of their promises, this Trump regime. In fact, they compounded and made things so much worse so they can suck up all the wealth. And then you look at Donald Trump's financials, and, that was one of the things this week, or a portion of his financials. When you actually look at what it says, it is absolutely horrifying. And then you have these right-wing, media machines. They try to act like they're criticizing it. Like the New York Post will do an article. They're like, we can't tolerate it with Hunter, and so we can't tolerate it with Trump and his kids. Okay, that's not even in the same universe. It's not in the same galaxy. It's not in the same, he's not even near, let's just be very clear. Hunter sat on a board called Burisma after Biden was no longer the VP. When Biden was the president, Hunter was not on that board. He was on it for a period when Biden was not even thinking about running for office, and then Biden thought about running for office. Hunter Biden got paid about $50,000 a month to be on the Burisma board. It was actually an important board seat for allies of the United States because the issue of Burisma, where it was located, was that this company had board members who were pro-Russia and it had board members who were pro-West. And so they needed somebody who would be pro-West to be on the board of Burisma. Hunter had sat on boards before. He was appointed by George W. Bush to be on boards. He's a Yale Law School graduate. He was a top lawyer at some of the best law firms in this country. Yes, his last name is Biden. Yes, that certainly helped him in life. Probably get partnerships and probably, get picked for boards that he may not otherwise have gotten if he wasn't a Biden. Nonetheless, he went to Yale and he worked at these places. He was on a board that paid him $50,000 a month. And so when you start to compare that with what we see with the Trump regime, where they're carving out billion-dollar deals in Kazakhstan for the Trump kids, billion-dollar mining deals in Kazakhstan. And that's just something that happens on Tuesday before 12. The sheer scale and scope should not prevent us from identifying how horrific this is. If you don't see the difference between the Kazakhstan deal, which in and of itself, that alone versus Hunter Biden sitting on a board and making $50,000, it's not even close. If you wanted to consider one as like a traffic ticket, like a parking violation, on the Hunter side versus a mass murder serial killer, the difference that analogy doesn't even come close to even doing it justice. But that's what MAGA and this $1 trillion machine does. Why do you think they go so hard after anybody who has even the whiff of the slightest thing that they can say, okay, now that's comparable to our $1 billion and $1 trillion grifts and criminality because Hunter Biden sat on a board when Biden was not even the VP and when Biden was not in office? What are we even talking? And then use a laptop, emails, documents. That's what they do because once they conflate it, then they just shout and they yell and they scream communist and they go Mamdani and they go this and that. And then people just like, I don't like politics. It's all just so loud. It's just so in your face. I'm not even sure how I can deal with and process all of this information. That is what the Trump regime does. And so when we think about this financial filing, one, recognize that it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the tip because there's a lot of ways for them to hide and conceal and route through other family entities to not have equity vest now, right? I mean, just have things that perhaps are, on future events are triggered. So in my view, the $2 billion that you talk about when you break down Trump's financials and you see 1.2 billion is crypto schemes. And then there's hundreds of millions in the 21,000 stock trades. And then there's the licensing deals, the real estate, the gifts. I mean, people just give the guy gold bars and gold, and gold rings. And I mean, just think about in the past week, we learned that this Belgian firm, Isidore Marcel, president of the Antwerp World Diamond Center, presented a ring to Bill White, the U.S. ambassador to Belgium, to give to Trump after this week from a Belgian diamond group months after it won tariff relief. So it got some tariff relief and it gives Donald Trump a golden ring. And as you delve into some more of the details of the golden ring, on the ring's band, dozens of diamonds spell out 2 giant letters T next to the stars and stripes, as well as 1776 and 2026. Dozens more frame the numbers 45, 47 in the shape of Superman's logo on the piece of the bottom's edge. In the center of the ring sits a diamond wing. Shut the F up. What the hell is this? And that's just, you want to talk about the other, you look at the gift section of his report, you look at when he made the stock trades, right before he announced his pause of the tariffs against the world last year, he bought tens of millions of dollars worth of stocks, then announced the pause, bought the dip. He created the dip and he buys the dips that he creates. You could see him on the financials that he buys his own dips. He has created all of these conflicts, and conflicts of interest doesn't even do it justice. All of these crypto schemes and entities where he's brought all this money in from the Middle East. You don't think that that's compromised us as well? When he went into this catastrophic war in Iran with Netanyahu and all of the different entanglements that he is in right now as a result of taking gifts from this person. Is it fascinating too that Qatar and Pakistan just so happen to be the main mediators of all of this? When Qatar gives him the $400 million jet that he's prancing around in, that American taxpayers had to add $1 billion of it. It doesn't even have a real bookshelf in it. It has like a fake bookshelf in it. Did you see that inside? This fake Air Force, this fake Qatari Air Force One thing. Although the taxpayer money that we had to pay for this is real. Pakistan invested hundreds of millions of dollars into Trump's crypto schemes. I read some article the way they framed what Pakistan did. Pakistan's big bet on Trump crypto paid off. Okay, this isn't like any U.S. president could have used the power and the influence of America as the leader of the so-called free world if you wanted to get all of these benefits and blackmail people and extort people and use America's leverage to enrich yourself. It's not a hard thing to have done. What is mind-boggling, though, is to see the media be okay with it, by and large, not independent media like us, and these MAGA people and the MAGA political leaders go, oh, no, nothing wrong with it. That makes perfect sense to me. It's okay. Hunter Biden this, Hunter Biden that. Just like Hunter Biden. It's not like Hunter. It's not even a close call, okay? Not even a close call. We'll start with that as the intro. We'll come back after our first quick break of the show. I want to read for you what former President Biden said. That's what I said I was going to do 10 minutes ago. But I want to get deeper into these financials. I want to talk about Jack Smith. I want to talk about what Katie Phang's doing. We got a lot of show. Hit subscribe here. Subscribe to the Legal AF YouTube channel and the Legal AF Substack. Also, if you or someone you know has been injured in a car accident, auto accident, trucking accident, you're looking for a lawyer, reach out to the Popok Law Firm. The consultation is free, 877-POPOK-AF, or visit the popokfirm.com. Reach out to Popok. Don't be shy. The consultation is free. See if you or somebody you know has a case. All right, let's take our first quick break of the show. We will be right back after a quick message.
Summer is here, and one of the best upgrades I've made at home recently is installing a Tushy bidet. It took about 10 minutes to set up, attaches right to your existing toilet, and honestly just makes you feel cleaner and more comfortable than using toilet paper alone. I also like that it modernizes the bathroom a bit. Warm water, adjustable settings, and way less wasted toilet paper. It's one of those products that feels luxurious, but is actually practical too. Stop guessing you're clean. Start feeling it. For a limited time, our listeners get 10% off their first bidet order when you use code LEGALAF at checkout. That's 10% off your first bidet order at hellotushy.com with promo code LEGALAF. One more time, our listeners get 10% off their first bidet order when you use code LEGALAF at checkout. That's 10% off your first bidet order at, wait for it, hellotushy.com with promo code LEGALAF. Look, magnesium, it's something most of us lack. And if you're taking that drugstore variant, you're still not getting the full picture. Industrial farming, chronic stress, and everyday aging all make it worse. Most supplements only use one form of magnesium, but magnesium comes in many forms that support your body in different ways. That's why you need to try Qualia Magnesium Plus. It combines 10 bioavailable forms of magnesium with more than 70 trace minerals for comprehensive full-spectrum support. Sleep deeper, think sharper, recover faster, support muscle strength, a steadier mood, and balanced energy metabolism. It's not just a sleep supplement. Oh no, it's a full body magnesium system built for modern living so you can feel your best every day. Since adding Qualia Magnesium Plus to my routine, I'm feeling easier recovery from workouts and a calm, more centered wind down at night. It's been a supportive addition to my daily wellness routine. Experience the most trusted magnesium for purity, potency, and performance. Plus, it's non-GMO, vegan, and gluten-free, making it a choice you can feel good about. Go to qualialife.com/legalaf for 50% off. And here's a bonus. Use the code LegalAF for an additional 15% off your order. That's QUALIA life.com/legalaf and then use code LegalAF. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode.
Welcome back to Legal AF. Thank you to all of our sponsors. They help support the show. Support them. Discount codes in the description below. As I noted earlier, I wanted to just share with you former President Biden's message because, again, regardless of where you are politically, this is the type of message that we expect of leaders, especially the President of the United States. He writes, 250 years ago, a group of Americans signed their names to a piece of parchment and made a promise no nation had ever made before, that we were all created equal, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're the only nation in history built not on ethnicity or blood or geography, but on an idea. That's always been what makes us exceptional. We choose that path 250 years ago, but that's where the work began, not where it ended. Every generation has had to choose it again. At Valley Forge, at Gettysburg, on the beaches of Normandy, in the streets of Selma, Americans recommitted themselves to the principles on which our nation was founded. My dogs really were into that section as well. Now it's our turn. There's nothing guaranteed about our democracy. We have to fight for it, defend it, and earn it over and over, year after year. That's not a burden. That's what it means to be an American. 250 years in, we still haven't fully lived up to those words in the Declaration, but we've never walked away from them. And this July 4th, I hope all of us can commit to one thing, that we never will. I don't believe we're as divided as we were told we are. I bet my whole life on the American people, and I'm not stopping now. Happy 250th birthday, America. Our story isn't finished. Let's keep on fighting together. Let's keep on writing it together, is what he said. I think, again, powerful words right there. That's what we expect. Instead, Donald Trump posts, is any Democrat ever happy? Going after communists, and just vitriolic hate that's spewed on a daily basis. And that's been the thing since Trump and that ilk went on stage, 15 years, 16 years ago, quite literally going down the escalator. But, with the Tea Party turning into this, rage machine, it's all been about dividing and turning against each other, politicizing every issue. And here we are on July 4th, where, you'll have people on state regime media like Brit Hume going, you're like, well, Ben, what could they possibly be saying on Fox after, reports like that? The financials. I'll just show you. I mean, you've got someone like Brit Hume says, look, the fact is he's rich. No one's ever saying that no one's saying that what he's doing is illegal. And as far as we know, he's paying all of his taxes. And it may be unseemly, but America wanted an unseemly guy. We knew that about him to begin with. First off, as you show, we don't know that everything suggests he's not paying his taxes. He did a super pardon deal with himself where he sued the government for $10 billion. While in 2026, he sued the government for $10 billion and entered into a settlement where the IRS is prevented from auditing him and that he can't be prosecuted or investigated for any crimes regarding taxes. So what makes you think that a guy who never paid his taxes before or barely paid his taxes is now paying his taxes when he also carved out a super pardon for himself to not pay taxes? I mean, they just say things. They just say words. So what are you talking about? No one has suggested that what he did is illegal. I'm suggesting it. Let me be the person to suggest that, in my opinion, that this is all a massive criminal enterprise. Lots of people are suggesting it. Actually, I think most Americans are suggesting it. And I think by you spreading, and it's just unseemly, you're creating a structure for people to say, oh, it's just unseemly, but he's going to make us rich. It's right around the corner, right? Oh yeah, he said 2025, they promised we were going to get rich. Okay. 2026, they promised we were going to get rich. Okay, now it's 2027. They're building the foundation. It takes them a long time to build the foundation for us. 2027, it's all going to be great. You know what they're going to say in 2027? We were so close. We were making you rich. Things were about to be amazing. We were right there. But then the communists won in the midterms and they've destroyed it. The reason why everything's crashed in 2027, it's the communists. They did it. Meanwhile, the Trump regime took all of their profits those first 2 years. They will screw you the hell over in 2027, 2028, and they will blame the communists and say, that's who did it. You see, if you're not MAGA, you're communist. They screwed us. We were so close. We were right around the corner. It was going to be amazing, right? Just like what Trump says with COVID. I mean, their story that they've pushed about COVID is that literally it was Dr. Fauci's fault. The guy who was there to help and the guy who tried to warn, they make him the bad guy. And so, now you have people like Bill Pulte, Donald Trump's mortgage, the guy who Trump put in the mortgage entity that no one heard of until the guy, another trust fund kid, was referring all of Donald Trump's political enemies for prosecution and saying they didn't do their mortgages the right way. Now he's the acting head of He's the acting head of ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, even though he has no intelligence experience. He's firing everybody at the DN, all the qualified, experienced people who work within our intelligence structure. They're now getting fired the same way the top prosecutors were fired, the same way FBI agents, the same way, people who worked at the CDC and NIH and all of these entities, were fired. We get rid of all the experts. And then Donald Trump, I know more about this than that. I know more about this than that. I know more about this. No, you don't. You know less about this than anybody. And you're an idiot. And you're crashing everything that you claim to be an expert in. You're not an expert in, and you're making it horrific. And this is what they're setting up for. Just to be very clear, they may try to take a little more profits, but then once the midterms come, they're going to say, now it's a communist takeover, and now that's why the economy is doing. We were going to do the factories, but they did it. We were going to do this, but they did it. No, like Trump just had to do nothing. If he literally did nothing and let former President Biden's economy just go on autopilot, you would have had manufacturing jobs. We were heading in the right direction. You would have had interest rates cuts. You would have, Biden did the CHIPS Act, which invested all this money in semiconductor industry, in the semiconductor industry. You wonder, people are like, there's an AI revolution and all of these semiconductor companies have made all of this money. Yeah, where do you think it came from? It came from Biden's CHIPS Act, idiots. Where do you think it came from? And then those companies go along right now, and I saw Micron as a company, right? Where do you think? How do you think Micron went from being a 50 billion market cap to a $2 trillion market cap? Where do you think it came from? It came from the CHIPS Act, in my opinion, obviously. Look at the years of when it went down. They were subsidized by the federal government to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. But then typical late stage capitalism, Micron, then this is what they do. And Trump announces it. Trump goes, the great company Micron is investing they're putting $250 million in a philanthropic enterprise into Trump accounts. He calls these accounts for children, these investment accounts that are being set up where the money goes into the stock market, back into companies like Micron. They're calling it Trump accounts, and they're treating it as philanthropic endeavors for companies to give money to the Trump accounts, which then become tax write-offs for Trump's right-wing oligarch buds who got funded and fueled by Biden and through actual bipartisan legislation in the CHIPS Act, got billions of dollars in American subsidies. Then they turn around, give $250 million in a kind of a philanthropic tax write-off. Trump, who owns Micron, then posts about it. Oh, the great company Micron. You look at Trump's disclosures, he owns Micron stock. He owns Micron stock. Like, what the heck are we doing here? You've got like the Michael Dell and Dell's, we're putting $250 into all of these Trump accounts to celebrate the 250th. Trump owns all of this Dell stock. You saw that? Trump owns all of the Dell. The guys in there, they've hit record profits as well following the CHIPS Act. and their stock took off after the CHIPS Act. And then they go around and then individually, then they cuddle up with people like Trump. And by the way, we've seen this. I mean, you see the oligarch pattern in places like Russia. I mean, you see what that looks like. America thought, that's not us. Yes, it has its flaws and its problems and major ones in the past, but that wouldn't happen. Yes, it's happening. Here's Brit Hume, an agent of the oligarchy, pretending that, Trump's just a rich guy. This is what rich guys do. Here, play this clip of Brit Hume.
But the fact that he took in $1.2 billion in crypto income in his first year of his presidency, there's no suggestion from anybody that I've saw in any of the reporting that anything illegal is going on. But Brit, it certainly is eye-popping.
No, it is, John, and I think that the right word for this is unseemly for a president to profit while in office. Now, it's not fair to say that he's profited from the office, although that's surely going to be subject to investigation, particularly if the Democrats get control of one or both branches of Congress. But if you wanted seemliness in the White House, Donald Trump was not your man. And if you wanted a guy that wasn't very rich in the White House, he wasn't your man for that either. The fact is, he's a very rich guy, and when you hold the kind of holdings he has, you do get richer. This amount from crypto seems breathtaking, but as the point was made by you and by Scott Bessent, not illegal. So the people who don't like Trump won't like this. The people who do like Trump won't care very much, in my judgment.
Why won't they care? Because you're telling them not to care? What do you mean, but not illegal? It looks like classic securities fraud to me. It looks like I'm giving you my opinion. It looks like classic wire fraud to me. If you showed that chart where someone makes $2.2 billion and the 1 million wallet holders lost $4 billion, yeah, that would normally be kind of investigated. And, you could kind of almost look at it and go, unless you're saying those 1 million holders, all of them were just completely, it's to be expected that they lose all of their money. You almost look at it and go, on its face, it looks like a criminal enterprise. So just because you say it isn't criminal, it isn't. You go, well, someone who's that rich has substantial holdings. Okay, stop just treating us like we're all stupid and dumb. Look, we understand that if you hold stock, if you hold certain things that increase in value in the past, sure, something happens called it compounds, right? Where you're making more money off the money that's made, the money's working for you. I understand that that's a thing that happens, but these weren't holdings that he had, then he went into office. And what we're talking about is our economy was booming, so his wealth compounded. No. Go look at his first term. He made 500 trades, which was 500 more than any former president. Now he did 21,000 trades in his first year alone. We're talking about new deals, new trades, new crypto holdings that were quid pro quos that he was using his office for. These are new hauls. These aren't just rich people and the value increases. It just infuriates me to no end to see the massive amount of lying and normalization of this taking place. And it's why we started this network, because it is infuriating to see a criminal cartel and a criminal cartel media network that works to normalize and justify the criminal behavior. And they do it with a collared shirt, and they try to make it look all normal and great, and that this is just the way rich people behave. No, this is the way criminals behave. This is the way Bernie Madoff behaves. This is the way Enron behaves. Actually, Bernie Madoff and Enron behave better, in my opinion, than this. This is the lowest forms of human scumbag behavior, what they are doing to our country and to people across the world at this point. And then you've got James Comer up there. James Comer, yet another agent of the criminal cartel. And he's out there and he's like, well, the difference between what Donald Trump is doing and what the Biden crime family was doing is that Donald Trump tells us all about it. He says, here it is, And then with the Bidens, I got to make up that they got 30 million from China, even though they didn't. And then I'm going to investigate it. And then I'm going to say they don't disclose the things that don't exist. And I'm going to make them prove a negative. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? This is what Comer says. Here, watch. This guy's supposed to be the head of the House Oversight Committee. Let's play it.
If you ask Donald Trump Jr., are you on a board for this crypto company? Are you on the board for this predictions market company? Are you on the board for this drone company? He will say, yes, I am. If you ask the president, the family, did you all do this development overseas in this country? Yes, it's the best development ever. It's going to be blah, 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 blah. They're transparent. If you ask Joe Biden, did you take money from China? No, I don't know what you're talking about. No one in my family took money. Well, then I subpoena their bank records, and guess what? There's money from China in there. Millions of dollars. For what? You may not like what some of the deals that the Trump family's been involved in, but we know about them. You know, the Democrats say, oh, you should be investigating Trump. For what? Well, his son's on a board of a drone company. What's to investigate? He's on the board of a drone company. Whereas the Bidens lied about everything. They completely lied, and to continue to lie to this day. So there's a big difference.
That's what, and he does it with a straight face. I mean, he is an agent of the RICO racketeering criminal enterprise right there. If you ask them, well, first off, you don't ask them. You're the head of the House Oversight Committee. Bring them in and ask them and hold a hearing, because you're not curious what Qatar was buying for a $400 million jet that they gave. It doesn't bother you that the president flies around in a Qatari jet, that Air Force One is a Qatari jet on America's. Why the hell do we need a Qatari jet as our Air Force One? It's despicable. What are we talking about here? You don't think that, I don't know, maybe Qatar's central role as the mediator right now in everything regarding Donald Trump's catastrophic and unlawful war, you don't think that there may be, some interconnectivity there? What about Pakistan? You think that the United States throwing its relationship with India into the toilet and Pakistan investing in Donald Trump's crypto? By the way, I think Pakistan did a pretty good job in its mediation, though, too. I mean, it's not to suggest they didn't at all. I mean, at least in terms of, at least for now, although I think it's going to be very fleeting. There's been a temporary cessation of the war, although the Omani lane is shut down. It seems, in my view, escalation is fairly imminent at this stage. I mean, it seems like, and it's part of a market manipulation scheme. And regardless, Pakistan's central role, India being pushed out, but India moving closer now to Russia and China after decades of U.S.-India relations. You don't think that has to do with Pakistan giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump's crypto and creating a crypto venture for that purpose? United Arab Emirates, their role in all of this, giving huge amounts of money in crypto. Jared Kushner is out there right now. You haven't called him once. He's out there in the Middle East at all of these meetings. So is Tiffany's husband, Michael Boutros. They're at all of these meetings, with the head of the UAE, with MBZ and MBS, and they're all out there doing these meetings, and it's undermining America's role in the world. America's far weaker right now global. I mean, it's not even close. America's power has been shattered, abroad at this point, and Trump's fine with it. Trump's absolutely, has no issue with it. You don't want to ask those questions to begin with. And then he's like, Joe Biden made millions of dollars. He didn't make millions of dollars. They just say the thing like it happened. No, he didn't. Joe Biden released his tax returns. Unlike Donald Trump, we saw it. He never made millions of dollars from China. It's just, are you going to have to prove a negative right now? How do you, it was like, did you see when Thomas Massey, by the way, Thomas Massey was MAGA through and through until he was like, well, you got to release the Epstein files. And then Trump's like, now we're going to cover up for the child sex trafficking. And Massey's like, well, we got to release those files. And Massey's also, we got to stop these never ending wars, and we got to stop aligning with Netanyahu and engaging in genocide. And then you're out of MAGA. What? You're out of MAGA. Get out there, Massey. So Massey then he saw what it looked like when state regime media Fox does this to you, when the MAGA, they do this to you. And so they were like, Massey, your ex-girlfriend says that you did this. What's your response? And Massey's like, it never happened. But so then he goes to the Fox reporter. He's like, hey, show us your internet search history. We hear that you love all of that, and then the guy like walked away. And so it's like, this is what they do. They prove the negative, and we're just going to push it out there over and over and over. I mean, I see what they're doing with Newsom here in California. They're like, some person who was in Newsom's orbit before she ever worked with Newsom wore a wire once, and as a result, this somehow relates to Newsom's wife's nonprofit, and the FBI is investigating Newsom. And then they'll just pump it out. And then Murdoch has all boom, pump, just pump it out everywhere. And that's what they do. They bend reality with their propaganda machine right now. And that's, that's the reality of what's going on right now. So you have Comer, you have Hume. And, look, I'll show you in a little bit when we come back. You've got people who are fighting for justice. You got Katie Phang at the Midas Touch Network. You've got Special Counsel Jack Smith, who's like horrified by what the DOJ has become right now. I want to show you what the latest updates with Katie Phang are. I want to talk about Jack Smith surfacing. We've got a lot more to discuss. Let's take our last quick break of the show. A reminder, if you or somebody you know has been injured in a car accident, auto accident, trucking accident, if you're looking for a lawyer, reach out to the Popok firm. Call or text 877-POPOK-AF or visit thepopokfirm.com. Also, check out his YouTube page, Legal AF, on YouTube, and check out the Legal AF Substack. All right, let's take our last quick break of the show. We will be right back. We've got a lot to discuss on our last segment.
That time of year when you finally stop hibernating and start getting back out there? Schedules fill up, weekends get busy, and this is when I start looking for clothes that are breathable, comfortable, and easy to wear. I've really been liking the Mack Weldon Ace collection lately. The pullovers and sweatpants are incredibly soft, super comfortable, and still look polished enough to wear out. The fit is easy and versatile. And honestly, it gives you that little confidence boost where you feel put together without even trying. Mack Weldon balances classic pieces with updated details like stretch twill chinos and button-ups that work from morning coffee to dinner plans. The clothes look classic, feel like performance wear, and they're effortless by design. Discover upgraded basics, fresh styles, and more at MackWeldon.com. Plus, get 20% off your first order of $125 or more with code LEGALAF. Get moving with Mack Weldon, comfortable anywhere. Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code LEGALAF. That's MackWeldon.com. Code LEGALAF. Well, it's time for some life talk. Life insurance talk, that is. You probably have it, but do you know how much you're paying for it? And for how much are you being covered? Odds are you paid too much for too little. And did you know if you receive life insurance through your job and you're unexpectedly laid off, you could suddenly be covered for nothing? Scary to think about, but simple to get right, thanks to Select Quote, where I'm headed to sort out my life insurance policy today. Unlike other one-size-fits-all life insurance companies, Select Quote's licensed agents work for you. In as little as 15 minutes, they'll compare policies from top-rated carriers to find you the best fit for your health and your budget. And they work for you for free. Get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at selectquote.com/legalaf. Save more than 50% on term life insurance at selectquote.com/legalaf today to get started. That's selectquote.com/legalaf.
Thank you to all of our sponsors right there. Welcome back to Legal AF. We appreciate them. They support the show, support them. Discount codes for all of the sponsors are in the description below. Katie Phang, Jack Smith, two people I'm grateful for on July 4th. Katie Phang's been fighting for the release of the Epstein files. She was the first reporter to file a lawsuit under the Epstein Transparency Act. Again, it's just an honor that she's on the Midas Touch Network. She prevailed. Federal judge issued a preliminary injunction order against the Trump regime, demanding that they respond by July 2nd, produce the privilege log, or produce the documents, lots of them that reference Trump's names and that have all of these redactions on it, or show cause why you can't produce the documents. And the Trump regime said, okay, we'll treat that then as a show cause why we can't produce it. And the Trump regime said, yeah, we're not going to produce it because Katie Phang shouldn't file a lawsuit. She should go and do a FOIA request. Even though when people have filed FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, under FOIA law, the Trump regime said, there's the Epstein Transparency Act, so we're not going to respond to your FOIA, which Katie Phang previously pointed out to this federal judge. The Trump regime argued in its filing on July 2nd, which was filed like literally just minutes before the deadline, that they already produced a privilege log or a redaction log. It was already finished, even though they didn't do it. They said, we gave a summary, and then we did a letter back in February to Congress of an exposed persons list. Remember the one where they like listed like Janis Joplin and like people who had nothing to do with the Epstein files? They would like list like Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're like, that was the privilege log. That's not a privilege log. A redaction log, just so all of our listeners and viewers know, I've done redaction logs in cases involving terabytes of documents. It's tedious. You go document by document, Bates number. Bates number is those numbers that you see at the bottom of the left of court documents. It could be like Epstein file, EFT 0001, EFT 1022234, whatever the numbers are. And you list why you're not producing that document. You assert the basis for which you're withholding a privilege claim if you're making certain privilege assertions. And then you give a little bit of a description so somebody can challenge it. So we know, okay, you're withholding it improperly. So they did not produce a privilege log or a witness log. Oh, and then they said, I did a video on this 2 days ago, that the reason that they didn't produce the co-conspirator list is that the co-conspirators are the victims. So they're protecting the victims. Even though they leaked the identity and the information of the real victims, the people who are listed under co-conspirators call themselves victims. So now the DOJ says, well, they're saying they're the victims, the co-conspirators. So now we're protecting them as victims. That's actually in the filing. So that's why they're saying to the judge, the co-conspirators are the victims, so we can't produce. We've already produced a privilege log and a redaction log because we've turned over a summary and a list of people that we say are on the list. And remember, that list was like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna, like people who were like trying to get the information out. Okay, here's Katie Phang describing how infuriated she is at the Trump regime's response. Let's play this clip of Katie.
Blanche maintains that FOIA was my only and remains my only option. And then he has the balls to say the following. He says that my lawsuit, quote, threatens the interdependence and the reciprocity between Congress and the executive branch. You know, folks, last I checked, I don't see a lot of interdependence or reciprocity between Congress and the executive branch. This is what I see. I see many members of Congress standing there impotent, not doing their jobs, not leaning into the power that has been given to them as they have been elected by their constituents to go to DC and to fight for us. I also see members of Congress who are interested in transparency when it comes to the Epstein files being thwarted left and right as they try to, look at documents in an unredacted format. We'll get to that in a few minutes. I don't see the DOJ working in any collaborative way with Congress to make sure that these redactions were done legally, the withholdings were done legally. None of that has been done here. What I have seen I've seen people like Todd Blanche, Pammy Jo with the bad hair, Kash Patel, Susie Wiles, J.D. Vance, and others assembling repeatedly in the Situation Room at the White House, with Todd Blanche quarterbacking strategy on how to avoid turning over the Epstein files to the American people. Does that sound like interdependence or, quote, reciprocity? I submit to you, it does not.
Katie Phang, an American hero right there. Very, very, very powerful stuff. So Katie Phang to special counsel Jack Smith. Jack Smith gave that incredible interview on MS Now with our friend Nicole Wallace. And let me just share with you Jack Smith saying something that we've been saying a lot here on Legal AF, that one of the big problems with what the Trump regime has done to the DOJ is that the Justice Department can't do its job anymore, can't prosecute cases anymore. It has lost the presumption of regularity that federal courts assume that the DOJ is staffed by competent people who can be trusted before a grand jury, who can be trusted with declarations, who could be trusted to comply with court orders. That's gone. So when you can't trust the DOJ, then the entire system gets shattered, not just as it relates to these cases where Donald Trump has completely weaponized the DOJ to go after political opponents, but also all of your just regular cases that don't get enough attention, but are very important cases, federal sex trafficking cases and federal fraud cases and other federal crimes. Those cases right now, criminal defense lawyers and public defenders and others, are now able to make arguments to the federal judge. Hey, we got to see the grand jury transcript because it's possible that there was misconduct that took place. Normally, it would always be secret, but increasingly judges are saying, yeah, we're going to have to get you that grand jury testimony because the presumption of regularity is gone. And increasingly, we're seeing misconduct take place, even in case everyone's obviously presumed innocent, right? But even in cases which should otherwise be strong cases against bad guys, bad gals, what are you seeing? You're seeing these cases get dismissed a lot because of there's procedural and technical, issues. And then once people maybe even get convicted, or had been convicted, Trump pardons them if they have the money to put money in a Trump political action committee or divert money, to Donald Trump or hire a lawyer who's part of the Trump inner circle cartel, and they get pardons. So that's where we're at. Here's what Jack Smith had to say about one of the problems that the Justice Department is that it can't do its job. Here, let's play it.
What do you make of the damage they're doing to our democracy at a moment you describe as dire?
Yeah, well, I think one of the problems, there's several layers, right? One of the problems right today, besides the retribution prosecutions, is that the Justice Department can't do its job, right? If you go to court...
Explain that.
Well, if you go to court and the judges don't trust you, you can't do the basic things that you need to do to represent the American people in court. And we have seen judges across the country say they can't trust prosecutors anymore. And that has such a cascading effect on any sort of case. I can't count how many opinions, but one opinion like that in my career would have been seismic. People would not know what to do if a court said, trust that's been built over generations has been lost in days, right? And that's happening every day. And so regardless of what you think politically, they're just not effective at doing their job anymore. They've jettisoned expertise, right? And so we have a situation where we've got rid of people who know how to protect our national security, and we think that that's somehow not going to have an effect on our national security. An example I can give you, Brian Driscoll. I don't know if you know who he is. Mm-hmm. He was
He made a great video at the beginning to kind of rally the troops, it seemed, from the outside.
Yeah, he's a folk hero in the FBI. If you were casting for a hero,
right,
that's what they look
Central
like,
casting,
right?
Yes.
And just for your viewers, this is a guy, career agent, mob investigator, SWAT team, hostage rescue, served overseas, Medal of Valor, bravery medals, all these things, and an expert in counterintelligence. They got rid of him because he stood up for agents who were being targeted improperly. You cannot tell me our country is as safe as it was when people like that are being let go and fired for no reason.
You know, that's what we've been saying on Legal AF and the Midas Touch Network for a long time. That this was my background when I was a litigator. I wasn't a Democratic litigator. You know, I wasn't like the Democratic Party, independent party. I represented, when I was a litigator, Democrats, Republicans, and I didn't even know what political parties the people were. I had to show up to court every day. I took depositions regularly. I did trials. You know, I had clients, and I had to be a fiduciary to them, do my best work, be diligent, be candid with the court, execute the tasks that were assigned to me, meet deadlines. That's not like a Democratic thing or a Republican thing. That was just like a thing, right? And so much of what we're seeing, in addition to the weaponization, which doesn't capture it. The word weaponization gets diluted because it's used against former President Biden, where I think the complaint that lots of Democrats had about Biden and Merrick Garland was that it wasn't aggressive, that it was the opposite. You know, that they were so afraid of the label weaponization that they let that Merrick Garland let the bad guys get away with it for so long. And then it was too late by the time he started the prosecutions, and it didn't matter because everything that they were worried about happening, they allowed the other side to build up their troops and their media machinery and just cry weaponization because it was brought 2023. But besides the weaponization aspect of it, or whatever, what you want to say, it's that you destroyed like a functioning government, functioning things that work, smart, intelligent people, top level people. That doesn't exist. Instead, you've cast a dystopian reality show of losers, literal losers and people, though, frankly, like Trump. Business loser pretending to be a leader on The Apprentice. Pete Hegseth couldn't run nonprofits because he was so corrupt and unethical, and the military ran him into the ground. And now a failed Fox weekend host, head of the Defense Department. You've got Howard Lutnick, Epstein Island boy, over there bringing his little kids to Epstein Island, right, to me, he's right out of central casting of Bernie Madoff. I mean, you just put more gray hair on the guy. The guy is right. Bernie, the whole shtick is a Bernie Madoff shtick, the Lutnick. He's the Commerce Secretary. Just all of these losers. And speaking of which, then you have Jeanine Pirro. It's basically your made-for TV, fascist Judge Judy, if you will, out there doing indictments against a two-time Olympic canoeist for dipping his hand into the reflecting pool, which was already damaged before he got there because Trump threw all this hydrogen peroxide into it after it was algae infested and disgusting. And, there were lots of tourists who were just touching the water. They were just fascinated by what the hell had just happened to the reflecting pool by this Trump regime, just self-sabotage of it. And then they arrest the guy and they charge him with felony destruction of government property. I mean, there used to be a time when people would jump in and take a swim in the reflecting pool. It wasn't encouraged. But now, because Donald Trump made up and lied that the vandals are shredding it with box cutters and throwing algae into it, they then have to create a prosecution around it. And that look, this is a case that will get thrown out. Then they'll blame the judge. Oh, the judge is weaponized against me. It's the judge's fault. It's a beyond frivolous, malicious case. They'll then whine about the judge the way Trump does in all of his personal and individual lawsuits. But the systemic damage this does to law and order generally. to the fact that in our country, our system of law and order has been destroyed and crippled by this regime, and that they've turned this country into like a failed state, into a failed country with right-wing oligarch pillages the treasury. There's no law and order. He's dishing out pardons, and the SEC isn't doing anything at all. That's the system that we've got. Here's Jeanine Pirro during her press conference. Let's play it.
Was this part of the pool specifically? Was the sealant already partially removed? Did he rip it back? And you just describe in detail, because he maintains that it looks the same as it did before he arrived. That's his.
I'm not going to get into the evidence, but what I told you is what our witnesses saw and experienced. There was an effort, a violent effort, to rip up the sealant from the bottom of the pool. And irrespective of whether or not, we think that, there is some situation that preceded it, we can state and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he caused damage, and that damage is over $1,000.
Keying in on that, how do you prove that $1,000?
With an expert.
Is that because
come to the trial?
It has to be drained? Is that because it has to be drained?
We'll hear all that at the trial.
Did he have any tools, or was it just his bare hands?
Right now, we believe it's his bare hands, both hands.
So does that indicate in your belief that it was probably damaged before, or do you believe that he
he damaged it.
Further, but do you believe it had already been damaged before?
He damaged the pool.
Before he touched it?
He damaged this pool.
But there have been, all these videos, obviously.
Well, good. I'm glad you've got that evidence. Come on in the grand jury. You can testify. Next.
Thank you for your time.
I mean, it's just so dumb. It's just so dumb. We all saw it was damaged before he got there. We all saw them pouring in the hydrogen peroxide, which anyone knows is going to rip up the paint at the bottom. We have the statements from the company that did the lining that talked about why it was happening in the first place. We know that the algae was there, the nano bubblers, weren't installed. Even if they were installed, it's not going to prevent all the algae. Trump drove his you want to know where the vandalism was? You don't drive your motorcade tens of thousands of pounds of vehicles over it. You're obviously going to create cracks in the bottom when you're trying to then put lining over. I mean, anybody can tell you it's the most basic stuff. But then again, it's the most basic stuff that if you do tariffs against the world, you're going to create inflation. And they can keep on saying all they want that the foreign countries are going to pay the tariffs. They're not. What the tariffs were, it was an extortion racket by Donald Trump to have mutually assured destruction for the United States and the other country, because tariffs would hurt both. It hurts trade. It hurts free and fair trade. It screws Americans. It screws consumers, and it screws the other countries as well that may want to trade with the United States. So everybody suffers except Donald Trump, because the point of the tariffs is to be used to say, okay, you want me to give you relief right there? I don't give a shit if the American people are hurt by you think I care about the American people getting hurt? I'm going to hurt your people. I'm going to hurt the American people. What you going to give me? You're going to give me a ring? You're going to do some crypto investments in Trump? You're going to do, you're going to help me with some stock trades? You're going to do a Trump property? Think about the countries that Donald Trump despises. NATO countries, Zelensky, they don't do these deals with him. Think about the countries he loves. They do the quid pro quos with him. That's the dynamic. And do you think that makes us stronger or weaker as a country? And then look at what he's doing with our criminal justice system. It is a criminal system now. It is run by a criminal racketeering enterprise that is Donald Trump's criminal enterprise. You take a look at those financials that were the subject of New York Attorney General Letitia James's prosecution, or the Alvin Bragg criminal prosecution, the civil prosecution by James, the criminal case by Alvin Bragg. You take a look at all of the class actions that were filed against Donald Trump. You take a look at all of that. That's what he's turned the country into on America's 250th. I mean, I still have hope. I still have a lot of hope. And I have hope in a generational project about what the United States can become. I think that after all of this, it should be very clear if we survive this, which I think we will survive this, the destruction and devastation that's caused by this. This is what our founders wanted to avoid. But our founders, frankly, certainly deserve they deserve criticism on a lot of things. They deserve, the Constitution was an impressive document. I agree. The vision that was set, if the vision is met, is something that is incredible. It is powerful. It is aspirational. It is wonderful, and it should be praised. The spirit of what America can be should be praised. And some of the great accomplishments that we have should be praised. We should not ignore the past and the problems that our country had, and we should confront them head on and make sure to avoid them in the future. But our founders, for all of the wisdom that you want to attribute to them, this Constitution was founded on an idea of a executive commander-in-chief faithfully executing the laws, taking care that the laws of Congress are faithfully executed, and that judges were going to also, on an even-handed way, apply the law, apply the Constitution, and reach outcomes that were the right ones. That's not happening. The system has broken down. Trump, who has been ripping apart contracts and destroying things, has destroyed the Constitution. All of the gaps in the Constitution, which were filled by an implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing called the Take Care Clause, that the president takes care that laws are faithfully executed, that is abused. That has rendered the entire Constitution effectively meaningless when you don't enforce the Constitution and you don't enforce the laws. So those loopholes need to be fixed. We need to truly think systemically about the composition of the Supreme Court. We need to think systemically about amendments to the Constitution and fixing it and figuring it out. It's deeper. It's more systemic when you actually look at the problems that exist, because the Constitution itself is very vulnerable if you have a lawless presidency like we do now, and if you have Congress co-opted and turned into the Russian Duma by the sycophants of the lawless executive. That's the real message on July 4th. There's hope, there's optimism, there's happiness in the future if we fight for it, but we also have to not go into it with blind optimism. We have to truly take notice, audit what's happening right now and fix it. Not as Democrats, independents, or as Republicans, but as Americans seeking to have another 250 years, because we won't have another 10 or 15 if we don't figure this out, if we don't fix it. And that's the truth. That's the reality. That's the July 4th message that I bring you, a one of realism right now. And that's why we've devoted our lives to Legal AF, why we've devoted our lives to this, to Midas Touch, why we've built this with you and us and this community, with hosts like Michael Popok and Katie Phang and Scott McFarland and Adam Mocklers and Tennessee Brandos and, the entire Midas Touch crew out there, and again, to see Katie Phang fight, that's what you got to do. That's what you got to. That's what you got to do. That's what we'll keep on doing here every single day. So shout out to all of you on July 4th. Shout out to your families. I'm grateful for you. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Legal AF. Just a quick reminder: subscribe to Popok's YouTube channel, Legal AF. Subscribe to his Substack, Legal AF. If you or someone you know has been injured in an auto accident, trucking accident, car accident, if you're looking for a lawyer, do a free consultation with the Popok firm. See if you or a friend or somebody you know has a case. Again, consultation is free. Call or text 877-POPOK-AF or visit thepopokfirm.com, thepopokfirm.com. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you. We're grateful for you. Happy 4th. Shout out Legal AF. Shout out Midas Mike.